Welcome, everybody. This is day 2 of the 2020 Building Solutions HPC Virtual Retreat. We're so excited to have each and every one of y'all here today. We're so thankful for each one of our HPC members, the thought leaders, innovators, and we're just so excited to have y'all as part of our team and us as part of yours. Just a reminder, for the Clean Slate Initiative, the HPC schools are able to use some allotment of your SPS hours to help with that program. So please ask your project manager or inquire to us, Joe Rayburn or myself or Warren McCutcheon, and we'll be more than happy to help you out with that. Today, we are starting off with Kevin Folsom. He is from Trinity Christian Academy, and Kevin has been a national leader in educational facility management since 1988. He began his career at Dallas Theological Seminary and left as a director of facilities and plant operations after 25 years. He is currently the director of campus operations for Trinity Christian Academy, an independent school in Dallas, Texas. Kevin serves as the chair of Codes and Standards Council of APPA and has frequently been an instructor in the APPA Facilities Management Institute, as well as the NBOA Annual Meeting presenter. Kevin Folsom, welcome to the 2020 HPC Virtual Retreat, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Bill. I sent you a text, if you wouldn't mind looking at that while I kind of get started here. Yeah, thank you for those that are here. I've been working on a project for pretty much my entire career, and it's been the progress of it would be shaped something like a pyramid. I've started at the bottom, and I've been adding sections of that pyramid on. And this section that I'm about to show you today is going to be the next section that I'll be working on for the next year. So y'all get to see my thinking for the first time here. So it's not very well polished, but I'm hoping I can kind of lay out the concept for you so that I can also get some feedback and hear some of your ideas and concepts about this. So this is really intended to be a discussion, and those of you that want to participate and add comments, feel free to do so. Because it's not very well polished and I haven't tested it among other people, if I say things or step on anybody's toes, please don't get your feelings hurt. I'm just trying to work my way through this. And I'll begin polishing this. Once I get it to a certain point, then I'll begin presenting it at various associations where I can also then perfect it, refine it through surveys, hear other ideas and feedback and things like that. So this is the raw presentation I'd like to share with you. And I was putting in slides just 5 minutes ago, so it's really fresh. In the facilities management world, there are two main forces that have to work together extremely well within an educational institution. And when I say educational institution, it can be the smallest all the way to the biggest. I've done a lot of networking with the director of facilities at the University of Texas, Austin, among other very large institutions, to be able to compare the things that I'm about to discuss with you, that they're all relative, and all of our schools have the same things that we work with in various capacities. The CFO, business manager, and the COO typically is the facilities manager. So we're going to talk about the relations and the communication between those two and try to understand the two forces that have to work together and how they can try to begin to understand one another. It seems that no matter the size of the institution, we have these two people. Many times you'll see the facilities manager reporting to the CFO. Not so much so in the higher ed world. It's more the COO or facilities manager is reporting to a president counterpart, or sometimes even to the president as a chancellor. But in the K through 12, it's pretty common that they report to the CFO, but they still have, either way, they still have to communicate the same to one another. I've personally worked for 2 institutions, as Bill mentioned earlier, and I've worked with 9 CFOs and 5 presidents. So I've been able to see a good share of diversity in my in the 2 institutions that I've had through my 33 years now, which in a facilities management, it's probably not very common to have that many of those to be able to work with. So I have a good basis to be able to draw from to see the different types of CFOs that I've worked with and how their thinking is, and all the various things that I've tried to test and perfect to get into their heads to help them understand what really is needed. So the facility manager, the CFO and facilities manager naturally are at odds with one another. One needs to spend money. This here covered my slide. Let me move this whole thing here. One needs to spend money to do their job, and the other tries to minimize spending. And so you can imagine those forces have a tendency to be very controversial with one another, or conflicting, and trying to explain it, because they're each trying to do their very best to do as much as they possibly can. The CFO wants to save as much as they possibly can, and the COO is trying to do as much as he possibly can to make sure that reliable facilities are provided to meet the mission. And they're both mission meeting issues. The reality is, on the facilities side, and the research that I've done and the things that I've seen and the metrics I've seen develop, we have to keep in mind that we're typically only spending about half the money that we need to properly manage facilities, birth to burial. So all of us that are in facilities, they see the problems. Why do we always have these problems, these failures, these last minute large expenditures, things of that nature? A lot of that is just because we're not properly spending money and planning it out long term to preserve the facilities to meet the needs of the school. Now, does that mean that they're not functional? No, we get by. Under these circumstances, most institutions, they do get by. There are some institutions that have gone bankrupt because they just lost control of the deferred maintenance and it became too much of a problem. It's a pretty rare situation, but it does happen. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that the accreditation process, public schools, government entities are getting pretty good at managing their facilities. I've talked to facility managers that have gone from private to public, and it used to be that everybody wanted to be in private. Nowadays, we have many facility managers that I've talked to have gone from private to public, and I just ask them how it is, and they say it's great. They get it. They know how to spend the money right and allow me to do my job. So that's something I want us to be very cognizant of within our private school industries. And as we're talking about school choice and various things that could happen, the accreditation process could become more of a standardized accreditation process that could be driven by the government. And if the government is already ahead of us as far as facilities management and protocol, we have to be very cognizant of that and be able to continue to measure where we fall within the management of our facilities. So let me get a little more into what some of the breakdowns between the CFO and the facilities manager. So the facilities manager, the financial business, are concerned about the financial business assets are very significant value, mission critical, complex with high risk. And the facilities grounds assets are significant value, mission critical, complex with high risk. Each of them have values that they have. Typically, what I've seen is that the facility replacement value of the campus, everything that's built on the ground, is usually at least 3 times more than the GIE of the school. So the gross institutional expenditures, let's say, might be $25 million, but the value of the campus facilities are usually in the $75 million to $100 million range. And so the values are very high for both, and they both require a lot of financial management, stewardship, and reinvestment. Each of them are lawsuit avoidance. The CFO, they're trying to save money through lawsuit avoidance. The facilities manager is actually having to spend money to avoid lawsuit avoidance. They're having to replace sidewalks, fix doors. Those things require expenditures and proactive thinking to be able to spend money. So there's one that has a tendency to be at odds with one another. The CFO wants to avoid theft. The facilities manager is trying to provide safety. So avoiding theft, you save money. Providing safety to the campus, you spend money. Financial stewardship. Now this is one that's an interesting correlation that I've been looking into just within the last year after attending NBOA. I wanted to hear all the presentations to CFOs relating to their financial assets. I've known all along that CFOs, every year they have to have their financial stewardship measured and monitored through the financial audit every year. And they almost, at least the two institutions I've belonged to, they always hire consultants to do that, as well as the one I'm currently at. So last year I asked our CFO, said, how much do you spend just in financial audits to be able to do that kind of thing? Because I just wanted to get an idea of what kind of money they do to be able to look through and make sure that they're spending their money properly, reinvesting properly, and all of that kind of thing. So he gave me his number. And then I got to thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. That's, and then because I'm trying to now look at a comparison to a facilities audit, which is basically the same thing. You're looking at the facilities, the portfolio of the facilities, which is about 3 times the value of the GIE. But we don't have a formal process to be able to measure those facilities and how we reinvest in them and how we preserve them and keep them functional and to keep the deferred maintenance at bay so that that's not building and growing. So a facilities audit I found is about 1/3 of the cost of the financial audit that's done every single year. A facilities audit can be done comprehensively one time, and then each year after that, you just maintain that database and keep it up to date and apprised. Now, the audit is going to produce money that the school is not immediately going to be able to spend because there's a lot of deferred maintenance and things that we're turning our blind eyes to because we don't really want to look at it. We're trying to focus on educating students. But in the meantime, if deferred maintenance is building, you have to look at that deferred maintenance that is literally a debt that the school is incurring, a silent debt that's occurring in the background, and it's accruing interest on a inflation value. So you got 3% inflation value on things that are being deferred because they should have been renewed earlier. And so we have to be very careful about that piece. So I just wanted to point out that audits are very important for both of these forces to be able to bring their numbers together and look at it from a real perspective. Whether it's too much to afford or not, you can't stick your head in the sand. You have to be able to know what do you have. And then we also spend a great deal of time in both of our forces with proper procurement. Typically, the facilities departments are more savvy in procuring construction, and they're usually rather large expenditures. And the responsibility of competitive bidding and trying to get things in apples to apples and then produce the information for the financial person to be able to see that, and from a stewardship perspective, be able to approve that. That can be a very difficult thing between the two. So the CFO and the facilities manager have a very heavy burden to carry to help the institution move along, and they have to be able to learn to work with one another. The next thing I wanted to describe is here's another thing that both of us have to deal with. I've worked with APPA for 25 years, and back then they were just starting to perfect or starting to do research in various models of facility management strategy, trying to figure out what are the scientific methods to be able to do this and make this work. After 25 years now, I just got through doing a very extensive review of all what they call the body of knowledge, where they've been able to collect all of this information and put it together. And I just got through reviewing it just last week, in fact. Went through about 3 months worth of research on that. And as I step back and look at it, I'm able to see that this is just absolutely has become perfect. It is amazing how well refined and how practical and how much depth is put into it for the total cost of ownership. And then financial metrics to be able to predict renewal and all the various engineering components and responsibilities of how we manage this kind of thing. And so so anyway, I set that aside. And then another interesting thing is I'm not a degreed math person, but my son is a degreed math person and he teaches math. So I like to learn from him various math principles, and I'm fascinated by math and how things work. And what I wanted to help you understand is there's the golden ratio. I can't really see everybody to be able to get a raise of hands, but many of you may have learned about this in your own college education or high school and that kind of thing. And this golden ratio is something that we see throughout nature, throughout music, throughout architecture. It's encompassing of everything around us. It's our eye naturally is drawn to the golden ratio for aesthetics. So if we look at nature here, you'll see all these various flowers. Everything grows within the golden ratio of that. And then the face of a human is also, you can put the golden ratio overlay on a human's face. Here's old Greek architecture. They probably didn't realize they were using this at the time. And there's a lot of times their architects probably don't realize they're doing it today, but they're designing things to fit within the golden ratio. It's the most pleasing, most structurally perfect form that we have to use today. This golden ratio is also something that's very useful to use in management practices. And what I can relay, the APPA strategy development of what they're using today, I would give it a golden ratio badge, something that's falling very closely within the golden ratio of long-term facilities management for those of us that own our facilities. This can also be used, you'll notice, are used within procedures of the school. So the CFO and the facilities manager, they're both creating procedures and processes within the institution. And all of those procedures are to govern in the most practical, efficient way for the school's institution. And if you're able to use the golden ratio for that, you'll see there on the Greek structure, there's a lot of different squares, and then there's a radius that fits in there perfectly. But each of those squares, let's look at those. So let's say that you have the CFO is in the small square, and the facilities manager is in the next bigger square. It's just from a values perspective of the things that we have to deal with. Those squares are golden ratios, and if we manage those golden ratios, each of our departments, they fit perfectly within all the other golden ratio squares. So let's say the one next to that might be the academic department. Well, probably the academic department might be on the far left, the large one. But let's say other departments in those other two quadrants. If all of those departments are using metrics that are within an industry standard at large of kind of a collection of many institutions, and we develop the golden ratio of, or the golden strategy of developing all of our procedures to work together, they all fit perfectly, and they're the most efficient way of being able to operate. And I think that humanity has developed many of these things already far enough along that we can begin to understand that and begin respecting each of them of how they all fit, so that we can all look at the institution as a whole this way. The golden ratio also, you may have heard the Fibonacci sequence, which is a series of numbers that all line up in a certain way that support the golden ratio. On the facility side of things, we also have the second law of thermodynamics that we have to deal with. And this is NASA's description of it. And I'll move my little thing out of my way again here so I can see it myself. There exists a useful thermodynamic variable called entropy, a natural process that starts in one equilibrium state and ends in another. Will go in the direction that causes the entropy of the system plus the environment to increase for an irreversible process and to remain constant for a reversible process. So from a facilities perspective, every component that we have, once you build a building, the day it opens, or before they even finish the facility, decay begins. Nothing is going to last forever. And the second law of thermodynamics is an explanation of what that process looks like. We have not been able to perfect building a motor that all the parts of that motor all are going to last the same amount of time. One part of that motor is going to decay and fall apart before the other. And preventive maintenance is one of the ways that we manage that entropy of all of the facilities that we have to work with. And at some point we have to replace it. And that's where we're predicting the facility renewal so that we have funds prepared to adequately renew the facilities before it actually fails. So there's a lot of components that we have that we just go ahead and we just let them run to fail, because if it fails, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And there's some components within the facilities that cannot fail. And so we have certain metrics and life cycle analyses that we can determine this particular component has reached the end of its life cycle, and it's very likely that it's going to fail. It needs to be replaced. So working with the facilities manager and the CFO, it's essential that we're learning to communicate with one another, and that we do truly understand the forces that we're having to manage and the stressors and the things that we have to deal with. The business manager understands the financial language. That's what they spend their day in and day out, all the financial aspects of the school, HR typically, and investments, working with board members, things of that nature. The facility resident expert, he's speaking more of a mechanical labor language, and each of these need to trust and try to understand what each other are saying. Learn to speak his or her language. You have to reach out to be able to do that. And I know that we're all very busy and we don't have time to do that, but we have to continuously learn what is the language of the other. And like I did at NBOA last time, I spent a lot of my time specifically sitting in seminars about what does the CFO have to deal with, so that I can bring that back and be able to talk his language and understand the things that he has to deal with. It's important for CFOs to be able to understand certain high levels of facilities management as well. And it's going to require sitting in some sessions and to be able to do that. So depending on the size of so now let's talk about staffing of the two. Depending on the size of the institution determines what level professional is hired at the institution. TCA, I came from higher ed, so I was a little more developed and had a lot more experience in the higher ed world than what probably most facility managers have when they come to a K through 12, a smaller school, so to speak. But that doesn't mean that I need to do anything different than what the current facility manager does. The current facility manager, whatever level you have, has the same responsibility of every institution. The golden ratio of a small school to a very large school is the same. All the issues are the same. All the things and the complexities that you have to deal with are the same issues. And talking with that facility manager at UT Austin, which I spend a lot of time with, I've met with him and I've just talked through all these various hurdles that I'm trying to get through and helping CFOs understand, why can't they seem to get this? Why did they not allow us to look ahead far enough to find out what's the proper metrics to be able to manage our facilities? Why can they not understand that not everything's going to last, or it requires an engineer to be able to design something? It's not just something you hire someone to just come in and fix it. There are a lot of mechanics and things involved with that. And he looked me straight in the eye and he says, Kevin, it's the same all the way to the top. You just cannot ever give up. So I have this, and you have to keep pushing and pushing your force that the school is dependent on you to do, to make sure your voice is heard. And you have to do it in ways that are creative and understanding of one another, and all within respect as well. And it can be very frustrating that you have all of this information and this knowledge, but somebody just doesn't seem to listen or to be able to hear what you're saying. And that goes both ways, the CFO and the facilities officer. So the way you work that variable and fit within the golden ratio of each school. So we have staff, and so let's say that a staff member, that the school is small and they hired a facilities manager that is relatively new to the industry, and he may not know as much as someone that may be in a higher ed world who's dealing with certain things every day. The way we offset that is through consultancies. We have consultancies that are available to us out there to be able to help augment our weaknesses and our shortcomings where we may not have regular access to that kind of thing. Consultants, good consultants, are going to have a wide array of schools access to them throughout the country, north, south, east, and west, to be able to draw all sorts of good ideas from. It is expensive, but if you have to look at it as kind of a staffing scenario, the nice thing about consultants is you only pay for what you get. You only buy as much as you want. Whereas if you hired someone like TCA, they hired myself there, I was probably a lot more than they really wanted. And I've been there 8 years now, and I've been able to do some tremendous work for them. But they've reached a saturation point where I'm probably not going to be able to do much more. I have a lot more to offer, a lot more to share. And so there's kind of, I'm toying back and forth. Well, okay, they're not really ready to move this much further. They probably just need to move to a consultant, and they could drop back to maybe a lesser cost facility manager, a more new guy that they could start building into training and evaluating and helping him to grow. So the point I want to make here is that the institution does need to right size their facilities manager, but then you also need to give them the tools they need to be able to help keep your school within the golden ratio of an educational institution within their facilities. Both CFO and facilities manager use consultancies to do this. And so the challenge is trying to find the right mix for that. How much staff do we hire? How much resources do we give him to be able to do his job at the level that he needs to do it, which essentially is the same as all of the big schools, but in a much smaller way, and he has to wear a larger number of hats. So they do need assistance and a knowledge base to be able to draw from for that. So let's see here. I have, so knowledge, ongoing training, networking, and comparing to campuses is necessary. Finding enough time to be able to do that is difficult. I know CFOs, they have to do that among their other CFOs. Facilities managers, I would die on a tree if I, or die off the tree if I could not have these available to me. Facilities management is changing significantly every day, and we have to be able to learn new techniques, new ways of doing things all the time and be abreast of it. And all contractors are new, they're falling to the wayside, there's new ones coming up, and all sorts of things. So this is very essential for both groups to do, and need to respect each other for the funding necessary to be able to do it. I've found that if you find the right consultants and you use them well and work with them, that they pay for themselves easily. It's a no-brainer. If you use the consultant well and use the right one, you will get your money back in that value that you've paid them. So do what you do best while you grow, and use consultants. So while you're using consultants, allowing the facility manager to also grow. The consultants are also teaching the facility manager because they're seeing how to do it, other methods. And so the consultant are doing their job well, and they're essentially kind of working themselves out of a job over a long period of time, because as they educate the facilities manager, he's rising up so that you use less of the consultant, or you extend further with the consultant to get further ahead to start bringing in more of the necessary components to maintain that golden ratio of management of the institution. So I like to keep really high goals in mind. I never have, this year we're just going to do this. I'm looking 20 years down the road. It's going to take me 20 years to be able to get this done. But I've always got my nose to the grind, and I'm always looking for some window to open to be able to push and jump through that next step to take us a little bit further in proper management. On the, I've had on my wall right under my light switch for 20 years a little placard, and it's a picture of a stork standing in the water, and he has his mouth open, and he has a frog in his mouth, and he's trying to swallow the frog, but the frog has his hands around the stork's neck, squeezing it to keep him from swallowing it. That's kind of the place where the facility manager lives, is they are always in that spot there. Something fails, it's going to fall on us. We need to do something more. We need to spend more money. They're ready to be eaten alive. And so keep that in mind, just from the attributes of or the aspects of the facility manager, what they're dealing with. I know the CFO is dealing with the same thing with their board and pressure from them and school heads and things of that nature. So it's something that each of you need to realize what you're dealing with. So that is what I had to share with you. And just wonder if anybody has any questions or comments. I probably should have asked that as I went along.
It's okay. Thank you, Kevin, very much. If anyone does have a specific question for Kevin, go ahead and just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
Yeah, or I'll look at text over here or chats, anything like that.
And Kevin, I have a sort of a general question for you. I know you went over a lot of information, and over the years I've been here at Building Solutions, I've seen transitions when it comes to facility directors and facility managers, meaning they either move to a new school or they retire and someone else comes in to replace them. Could you give 1 or 2 points of advice of what you would advise a new facility director on how to communicate with their CFO? Just 1 or 2 or 3 specific points to remind them these are some key things to think about when you're starting out as a new facility director or facility manager. Here are some things to think about when you want to communicate with your CFO.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation to where to go with that. I tried to have this discussion with our current CFO now, that at the beginning, these are areas that are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and then he could tell me, here are my weaknesses, and I've never done that before, I've never done this before, so I'm relying on you to do that. But I have found that CFOs do get into a position where they are they really still don't want to listen to the facilities person that has the expertise and has had a lot of experience in that particular way. So somehow that disconnect of communication or trust of one another happens. But I do believe that if you're able to have a difficult discussion at the beginning, when I went to work for my current school, because I was a little more confident, I was a little further along in my career, I was able to ask a lot of the hard questions at the beginning and just tell them, okay, I just want you to know that this is the way I operate. This is what I'm going to be always striving for, and all of that kind of thing, because I wanted to say these things first before they hired me. I didn't want to come in and they hire me and then we come back later and say, okay, well, here's what I want to do. And they're like, whoa, wait, what are you talking about? And then I'm totally frustrated because I know too much about facilities to not sit by the side and let it go to waste and that kind of thing. So if it's a new facility manager, I think it's important that they understand that they don't know everything. They're willing to learn it, and that I'm going to need you to give me resources to augment my deficiency while I build up to the point that the school is really going to need. So somehow that discussion has to take place there. And it really makes you in a vulnerable position, because most of the time people are really excited and they want that job. And they're typically going to try to say whatever they want to say. So if there's some way that the CFO or someone can get that, or the hiring person can get that information out of the facility manager, I would say is the facility manager teachable? That would be what you're looking for. If we were, we don't expect you to know everything about facilities management when you come into this position. So we're going to give you resources to be able to help augment your shortcomings. We're just going to face the fact you're going to have shortcomings because you're new in this industry. And we would like for you to effectively use these resources to help augment that. And the CFO would say, and I'll help you with that because it's expensive. We don't have unlimited money, and we just kind of pace it out. So I think that would be if there's a way a school could have that kind of discussion between the CFO and the facilities manager whenever they hire, and have each present involved in the hiring process, would be really very useful, I think.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have a question for Kevin?
Well, this is Maureen. Hi, Kevin. Actually, when you're talking about resources that are out there for the new facility directors, or even people that have been in the job for a while and they're just hitting a roadblock, what are some of your recommendations where they can go to for that training?
Let's see if I understand your question. So you're saying that we have directors that have been there for a long time, and maybe the schools are trying to get them to advance, but they don't really know where to go. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, more or less, yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things there. One is the facilities manager. It's best if he's a really outgoing person. I'm naturally an introvert, but professionally I've had to become an extrovert. But in my personal time, I'm very introvert. I could sit in my house and not talk to anybody and be fine with that. But professionally, we have to develop ourselves. And if you can't do that, there are some facility managers I've come across, they just can't do that. They cannot bring themselves to network and get outside of their industry for one reason or another. And so the next way to be able to gain information is they're going to have to reach out to some level of consultancies to be able to augment them. And it's going to be difficult because the facilities manager is going to have to try to convince the CFO to spend this money for this kind of thing. And they're like, well, that's what we paid you to do. And then the school's going to say, well, and if the facility manager was willing, he says, well, I need to go to this training. I need to spend about $5,000 or $6,000 a year to go to these conferences. And then, the CFO is going to say, no, we're not going to spend that kind of money. We don't have that kind of money for you to do that kind of thing. Well, how am I supposed to learn and be able to find ways to do things? The next level is you might be able to tap into contractors directly. That can be a challenge. I do learn a lot from business partners, as we call them. It's usually cross paths with those at associations where they're looking for ways to advertise and look for business with particular schools. But you can really learn a lot from those business partners. But you have to always keep in mind that they're a good bit less unbiased than a consultant. A consultant is going to be unbiased. They're not going to have any affiliation with any contractor, and they're not going to try to push you into a certain contractor. They're actually going to help you evaluate a particular contractor and be able to vet, are they telling me the truth, or are they pushing me so far that they want me to buy something more than what I really need? And that's where the magic of the consultant really happens, and how they pay for themselves is that way. Does that kind of answer your question, Maureen?
No, that did. It did. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maureen. Does somebody else have a question for Kevin? We have a few more minutes.
I like the Fibonacci series and the golden section. That's a great analogy for the delicate balance that's required between everybody in order to maintain buildings and keep things moving forward in a positive way.
Yeah, that's great, Sean. I appreciate that feedback. That's just something that I've known a lot about those things for a long time, and it's not until just recently, because of my review of all the APPA documents and everything, I'm thinking that is the golden strategy. That's the way to make it happen. And all schools will be faced with every aspect of what they've put together. Yeah, thanks for that.
But what's interesting about it is when if you're looking at the golden section, take the Acropolis that you had up there. if one of these items is off by even a little bit, everybody notices it.
Right. It doesn't
It
fit.
becomes quite evident when that balance is off.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so finding that balance and constantly maintaining and looking for that, it's an aesthetic value, but it's also an engineering beauty of engineering as well. Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal when you start thinking about it that way.
Kevin, one of the things that you've done very well at TCA, and I know you did it at Dallas Theological Seminary too, is relate to the CFOs on the grounds where they're most comfortable, and that is providing them financial analysis. When you have an idea, and you may not realize it, but a lot of people just don't have that inclination or the skills or the practice in doing it. But one thing that you've learned, and I think has helped you a lot, is when you take an idea, you begin thinking about it in the same way that your boss does. Is what are all the financial implications? Is there for people who aren't as practiced in that, is there sort of a short course or a tool or an idea, a simple idea you could offer to help people if they're setting about to sell an idea to their boss about how to do that analysis quick and dirty?
Yeah, I have, because I've gone through this so many times over and over, and I feel like I've failed a lot of times trying to make it work because I'm always after spending money. And it's unfortunate, the schools, the CFOs, they have a tendency to look at that as, well, I'm just trying to put some new whiz-bang thing in the school and we don't really need that. I'm like, why would I propose to put in some sort of whiz-bang thing in the school just because it's fun? It's going to make the school better and you're going to save this much money. So return on investment, pretty much everything. We have to be able to apply it to return on investment. That's a pretty easy calculation to be able to come up with. So as a result, I try not to spend a tremendous amount of time on each proposal until I know that I have kind of an inkling or an idea of like, yeah, I like that. And then I'll build it to the next level. So what do you think about this? Is this building kind of working toward your method? And then, yeah, I like that. And then a little bit further. And then they say, how'd you like to spend a little money on that and we take it this far? No, I don't like that anymore. And then it stops. Or sometimes they'll take off with it. There was one time where we were building a high-rise building, and it was 9 floors, and they were having very, very difficult making the pro forma work. It just they could not get the return on investment through rents to be able to make this thing work. And they were just racking their brains and had the architect trying to figure out how to strip cost out and how to bring it into alignment to get their ROI to work. And I just made a simple suggestion. I said, how about you just add a floor? And they kind of paused and said, that's bold. And then they put the numbers to it and it worked. And then they went with it and they added a floor. And now the building today, here 20 years later, is doing very well in its return on investment. So it's really hard to say how you can get into their heads and get the timing down to be able to plant an idea. Facility managers typically are the most creative solution providers you can find. That's just the way they think. They're always thinking of a solution of how to make something work or how to get past a hurdle. And it would just be great if we could have CFOs and facility managers see more eye to eye in that way, and hear what the facilities manager is saying. Sometimes the CFO may have to take a little bit of a risk because they trust the facility manager to pull it off, and that kind of thing. So I usually start small with that, and then I get into start getting into spreadsheets, and I really don't have any highly complex spreadsheets. They're all pretty simple. I never use any of the fancy formulas, and I just use the basic subtract and multiply, basic math and that kind of thing, and just try to, and I see the spreadsheets of what CFOs use, and I feel like I've been able to come up with spreadsheets that compete, or sometimes even better, what the CFO puts together themselves, and that kind of thing from a facilities perspective. So I always try to model it to what will the CFO be looking at? How will they see it? Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, I think sometimes we just we don't know where to start, and I guess just the basics in terms of the return on investment. Maybe we're not dialed in on really what the benefits are of that thing. We know they are beneficial, but we don't think about all the ways that say replacing a component would help. It's going to reduce energy costs. It's going to call for less service calls. So why? Well, what does that do? Well, so my guys can spend their time over here in this area that you have been griping at me.
Right.
I've been paying attention to. I mean, thinking that framework, I think, of thinking about things in the broadest terms. Sometimes it's hard to do when you're in the middle of the forest and you're trying to find your path through it, to step back and realize in the big picture what you're doing.
Boy, is it ever. That is a really big challenge of one when you're right in the middle of the hurricane, which the facilities manager, you're basically sitting in the eye wall day in and day out. And sometimes you just need an outsider, someone to be able to come in and to be able to look at that. And everything revolves around need. You have to find the needs. And if you can't find the needs, then there's no need in even talking to the school, because if it's not needed, they don't want to hear about it. So somehow being able to help them see their needs in a concrete way, these are needs, are these important to you? Then you start building out from there. So I think that would be a good case for a consultancy to be able to help. If you can just buy a little bit of their time, we just want you to come in and just help us look at these particular things. We have several needs that we think we need. Do you see anything else that could be exacerbating the problems that we seem to be having here?
We're here on this HPC workshop. I think we would be remiss if we didn't remind everyone that one of the things that you're encouraged to do as a part of the HPC program is to use those special project services hours that you have coming to you. That's exactly the kind of casual, and by casual I mean kind of a short-term mini project, or not even a project, a question. This is the sort of thing that if you're looking for an outside sounding board, or someone who may have seen something like this before elsewhere, this is exactly the kind of thing that you have available to you through the HPC program.
That's a great point, Bill, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot too. Is that I do have, just for one example, is energy management is a really big thing for me, and I put a lot of time into that. But when I'm in the middle of the eye wall of the hurricane, of everything going on, I can't focus on that the way I need to. And energy management's pretty much a standard thing. It's not like it's different for every person, but you can't really come up with a return on investment till you understand your facilities management and how you manage that. So that's something I've been thinking about, is somehow getting you guys to be able to take that on for me. Here are the metrics I follow. Can I just send my invoices to you guys and y'all just populate this and keep it up for me? Because I cannot keep this up. But I need to be able to show evidence how some of the older machines that I have are causing problems and things of that nature. So yeah, those are, then that would be great to be able to have those hours to be able to do that kind of thing.
Wonderful. Well, Kevin, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for attending this session. We have one more session coming up next in just about 7 minutes with Sherry Offenhauser from Page. Hello, Sherry. Good to see you. We will take a short break for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll get started right at noon. Appreciate everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again, Kevin. Thanks everybody for attending and your questions. And stick around. Sherry's up next.